Welcome to the sixth and final episode in our series on the book of Ruth. Remember way back when we started, I made a big point out of which person was named first in the book of Ruth, and that was her father-in-law, Elimelech, because he owned the land, which was the patrimony of the family. Well, today I'm going to make a big deal about which names are listed last in the book of Ruth, because those are the recipients of the patrimony of Elimelech. When we turn to the very end of the book of Ruth, we find two prominent names. The last two people mentioned in the book of Ruth are her grandson Jesse and her great-grandson David. The book of Ruth concludes with the words, "They called him Obed, he was the father of Jesse, the father of David." But that was a false ending because the book isn't really over yet. There are 5 more verses, an appendix containing a genealogy, and the true final ending of the book of Ruth is the end of the genealogy. Obed was the father of Jesse, and Jesse became the father of David. The final event in the narrative is Naomi holding in her arms her grandson Obed. 20 years after that, or so, Ruth would have held in her arms her grandson Jesse, called Yishai in Hebrew. First Chronicles provides a fuller list of the possible sources of information for our book. Jesse fathered his firstborn, Eliab. Aminadab was the second, Shemaiah the third, Nathanael the fourth, Raddai the fifth, Rozem the sixth, David the seventh, and their sisters were Zeruiah and Abigail. We don't know the age of the sisters, whether they were before Eliab or after David or somewhere in the middle. But the sisters are as likely to have been the actual sources as any of the boys. Remember how important the female characters are in our book of Ruth. Remember that the book of Ruth would never have happened without the persistence of Naomi, without the faithfulness of Ruth. Another woman who may have had a signal role to play in the transmission of the information and formation of the book of Ruth was the wife of Yishai, the mother of Zeruiah and Abigail and David. She certainly would have heard the stories first before her daughters did. The Bible does not reveal to us what her name was, but in the Talmud she is called Netzevet, the daughter of Adel. She was the first queen mother of the house of David, being the mother of David himself, and thus was the first woman with the royal title of Gabora, or strong woman. While remaining unnamed in the text of the Bible, Netzevet does appear in the narrative. In chapter 22 of 1 Samuel, when David is being persecuted by King Saul, and King Saul is killing anyone who provides aid or comfort to David, including priests of the Lord, David fears for the safety of his father Yishai and of his mother Netzevet, and he takes them across the river to the land of Moab. And there he asks the king of that country to provide sanctuary to his father and his mother. It is verse 3 of chapter 22 of 1 Samuel, where David says to the king, Yetzei na abi wa immi etchem, let my father and my mother stay with you, that's with you plural, meaning with you Moabites, Rav asher Eidar ma ya'aseh li Elohim, until I know what Elohim will do for me. This is a lovely prayer, and David never would have taken his parents to Moab unless it seemed that that was a place of safety for them. Now remember that Ruth was 100% Moabite, and that her son Obed was 50% Moabite, and her grandson Jesse, yes, that's this very father that David has just brought, is 1/4 Moabite, and David himself is 1/8 Moabite. Also, that in their lives, Jesse and David went to Jericho occasionally on a fairly regular basis to trade, to bring produce, to make purchases, and there would have had occasion for contact with extended members of their family. So Obed had first cousins in Moab whom he might have seen at Jericho. Jesse had second cousins whom he may have seen at Jericho, and David had third cousins who he may have seen at Jericho. The probability of occasional meetings is quite high. They may have even planned meetings ahead of time. So, David and Jesse had contacts in Moab. They were not going to an unknown land, to terra incognita. They were going to the homeland of their great-grandmother and asking for sanctuary. And thus, the book of Ruth would be a motivator for the Moabites and the family of Jesse to rehearse and remember their links to each other. I therefore suggest that the book of Ruth was specifically written during this time of the exile of Jesse in the land of Moab, in the land of his grandmother. And there he told tales to the Moabites about Ruth, and they told tales to Jesse about Orpah. And when they put the stories together, it morphed into the narrative of our book. I further propose that Abigail, the younger daughter of Netzebeth, accompanied her mother and father on their exile into Moab. It was customary in large families through most of human history that the youngest girl would remain unmarried until the death of her parents, and then she was free to start a family of her own unless the parents had lived to an advanced age and it was no longer possible for the young woman to have a child. The Bible says that Abigail did have one child. That would indicate that she had a short span of childbearing, either because it was cut short through difficulties or because she got a late start. If it was a late start, it meant that Abigail would have accompanied Jesse and Netzebeth into Moab to continue caring for them in the other land. If anything, they needed her more in the other land than they did in their own. Remember that Netzebeth was the mother of one of the greatest poets of all time, David, and Abigail was his sister. If the literary gift belonged to one member of the family, it could very well have been more widespread in the family than what we know. So therefore, there is a strong suggestion that Nitzhevet and Abigail, together with the Moabite women, their counterparts who remain unknown to us, pieced together the basis of the book of Ruth as we have it. It is a family's story. It is a story told by members of the family. It is a story of women's role in family, which would be of prime interest to women members of that family. These are the candidates for the creators of the book of Ruth. It was something that could keep them busy during the sadness of their exile in Moab, where they did not know the outcome of the king's persecution of their family until events had transpired. It was a bold thing for the king of Moab to grant sanctuary to the family of someone who was being persecuted by the king of Israel. It allied one kingdom with rebels from another kingdom. If the king of Moab had had any reason to doubt the connection to Jesse, then he would have earned points with King Saul by handing over David's parents to them. Only if the link to Jesse was very strong on the part of the Moabites was that really a place of sanctuary. Therefore, the reinforcement of the relationship through the sharing of memories and the creation of a narrative was a way of sealing the bond between the royal house of Moab and the future royal house of Israel. Yes, when the house of David sat on the throne of Israel, and it sat there for more than 400 years, there was Moabite blood running through all the kings of Jerusalem. There is Moabite blood in the Messiah. And so the book of Ruth documents, establishes, and proves the link between the royal houses of Moab on the one side and Israel on the other side. We would not know that without the book of Ruth. Book of Ruth is as important in Moabite history as it is in Israelite history. Thank you for following us through these 6 episodes on the Little Book of Ruth. Next month, we will have a series of 7 episodes on the O antiphons leading up to Christmas, including O Root of Jesse and O Key of David. See you then.